Hello, demons, fae, and those in between. This is Dizzy, and I am back. Sorry about the little break. I did not have access to my recording equipment for about a week, but I'm back now, and I will be continuing with Chapter 4 of A Thing with Wings by PaperPuffin. Let's get started. Mr. Drake Wayne, do I want to know why you're here? Lucius drawled without looking up from his desk. Tim plastered on a smile anyways. Well, in an effort to learn the business as part of my internship, I thought it would be about time that I took a proper look at R&D. Yes, it would be good for you to see R&D, Lucius said as he signed something with a flourish before he folded his hands and looked up at Tim. But you are not going to. No? No. Tim let the door close behind him and came to flop into the seat across from Lucius. Uncle Fox, that worked much better when you were small and doe-eyed. Okay, let's be honest, Tim said with a sigh. I'm still small and doe-eyed. None of them will let me live that fact down. I have to use what I have, Lou. Finally, Lucius cracked a little bit of a smile. He leaned forward and pressed a discreet button on his desk. Tim knew that the button made the office soundproof, an effect that Tim felt in the back of his ears. Danny Fenton, and let me be clear, it's Danny, not Daniel. Danny Fenton is one of the best people I have in R&D. I will not have you losing me one of my best because you do not know how to be subtle. Lucius, we can be subtle, Tim said, honestly offended. We do subtle all the time. You know how well I do undercover. Exactly, Lucius said severely. Tim tilted his head. Undercover you is subtle. Tim Drake Wayne, you, is a menace, Lucius said. That last name is a pox upon common sense. Tim opened his mouth to argue before he slowly closed it and slumped back into his seat. I had been considering bringing him in as an engineer for the other side of you all, Lucius said, almost idly. But whatever happened spooked him. He booked the end of the week off. Mr. Fenton never takes time off. Whatever you're after, it will have to wait until he returns. Understand? Understood, Tim said with resignation. The only reason Danny didn't screech and drop the component he was holding was because he was used to ghosts. The person who had appeared sitting on top of Danny's cabinet like they had always been there wasn't a ghost, but the behavior was close enough. Danny took a steadying breath and set the part carefully down on one of his workbenches. Hello. The odd person smiled cheerfully and brought their right hand up into a salute-like motion. Danny tilted his head for a moment before his brain kicked in. He repeated the motion back before pointing at the person, then tapped his index finger to his cheek, and then next to his ear while purposely screwing his face up into confusion. They shook their head. They brought their hand to their throat, turning it like they were locking a key, before making a so-so motion with their hand. Oh, okay, I'm Danny, he explained as he pointed to himself and then brought his hand up in the sign for D up along his flat left hand. They repeated Danny's sign name with a cheerful smile before they pointed at themselves and moved the cup hand of C over their flat hand. They repeated the sign before finger spelling out Cass. It's very nice to meet you, Cass. I'm rusty at ASL, but if you go slow for me, I'll try my best. Thank you, Cass signed with a bright smile. Are you lost, or do you mean to be up there? Danny asked. Cass shook their head. Comfortable. What is that? Oh, what I'm working on? Well, it's nothing yet. Not if it doesn't work. It's supposed to be something for improved water filtration, though. Explain? Sure. Type twice on the cabinet if you need my attention or have a question and I'm not looking your way, okay? Danny asked. He waited for a nod before he grabbed what he was working on and started explaining the idea. Thankfully, the fact that WE was working on a way to further reduce industrial water pollution was no secret, so as long as Danny didn't get particularly technical, he shouldn't get into trouble over his NDA. Besides, whoever this was inside a secure part of WE and did have a badge, even if it wasn't colors that Danny recognized off the top of his head. Cass was oddly fun to chat with, and the two of them got into a rhythm of him explaining something and following it up with a question of his own. Cass did give verbal responses or reactions occasionally, but mostly Danny settled into a position where he could both work and watch them sign in his periphery at the same time. He wasn't perfect at understanding what Cass was talking about, but they seemed happy enough to repeat things for him or fingerspell when he was really lost. A lead role? You should be really proud of yourself, Cass. That's amazing, Danny said with a bright smile as he fought a stubborn taper. You will come? Danny blinked. Sorry, what? Recital, Cass fingerspelled out before they repeated. You will come? I don't know, Cass, honey, Danny said, the endearment slipping out without him thinking about it. That would really depend on what your adults have to say about the idea. I don't want them to freak out because you've decided to befriend some random R&D flunky. Luckily, Cass is a very good judge of character, said someone from behind Danny. Fucking hell, what is it with the people just appearing today? Danny gave himself a second to close his eyes before he set down his taper and turned around. Ancients, that was Bruce Wayne. I hope she hasn't been bothering you. Cass was supposed to wait in my office while I dealt with the emergency, Mr. Wayne said, with a pointed look at his daughter. Even if it did take longer than expected. Right, daughter. Because Danny had been talking with Cassandra Wayne for the last few hours. Oh, no, not at all, Mr. Wayne. Bruce. Bruce? And don't worry, she's great company, Danny said. Mr. Wayne, Bruce, chuckled and stepped into Danny's office. He'd hardly moved before Cass was flinging herself off the cabinet into her dad's arms. As soon as she was set down, she started signing rapidly at Bruce. Danny looked away to give them some privacy. Well, that is up to your new friend, Bruce said, in a sort of tone that Danny knew meant he was being included in the conversation now. Danny Fenton, but just Danny is fine, he said. Cass signed Danny's sign name. Or that, Danny agreed with a nod. Well, Danny, Bruce said, along with the name sign and a smile that made his eyes crinkle a little. If you'd like, Cass would love to have you at the opening so that you can see what she's been telling you about. But if you're busy, we understand. Cass's pout said otherwise, but Danny caved quicker than a paper cocktail umbrella in a tornado. If you can send me the date and where to buy a ticket, I'll be there. Nonsense. The ticket is on me, Bruce said. I'll be sure to send you the date and time. I doubt Cass will let me forget. No, Cass signed with an overly angelic smile. Danny chuckled and couldn't help but wonder if all of Bruce's children had him so thoroughly wrapped up around their finger like that, or if Cass had only daughter privileges. Well, I look forward to it, and it's very nice to get to meet you, Cass. Yes. Goodbye, Danny. Cass signed. Goodbye, Cass. Danny signed back, and returned the little nod Bruce sent him before they left Danny's office. Danny waited until they were out of sight to let out a breath. Ancients, well, that was something. Who would have thought the first time he actually spoke to the owner of the company would be because his daughter decided water filtration was interesting. And Danny needed to learn all about Swan Lake in return. Cass, darling, Bruce said with a pointed look at his too smug daughter. He's nice, she explained with a shrug. Bruce just sighed and shook his head. At least that did seem true. Bruce had watched some of the exchange between Danny and Cass, and he was patient, respectful, and attentive even despite the occasional communication issue. But that hardly answered any of what was going on. Just don't overwhelm him, all right? Cass nodded and crossed her heart. Bruce didn't believe her for a moment. Next Thursday, the email said, All right, Danny could do next Thursday. He still didn't know how he had gotten invited to Cassandra Wayne's dance recital, but sure enough, there was a link to the ticket and the event information in his email the next morning. He was just checking in on work real quickly before he left for the Far Frozen. Or maybe he was putting off the trip for as long as he could. Danny knew that he had to go see Frostbite, but he was afraid of what answers the Yeti might have. Or more, the answers that Frostbite didn't have. Danny didn't know which would really be worse. "You're on a vacation, Mr. Fenton," popped in Danny's Slack, and he rolled his eyes. Of course, Lucius was keeping an eye on him. "Just checking on things before I leave," Danny replied. "I'll be off for the next 5 days, promise." That better be true. He wouldn't have much of a choice. His current phone wouldn't work in the zone. Danny refreshed his inbox one last time before he turned his tablet off and tucked it away in the basket next to the couch. Fridge emptied of anything that would spoil, trash taken out, far too many plants watered. Danny was out of excuses. "Going ghost," he grumbled with a sigh. He really didn't want to say that part out loud anymore, not after all these years, but sometimes it just made it easier. A sense of bitter, biting cold washed over him. It was like breathing ice. The shards stabbed at his lungs, choked his air, killed him. And then it was gone. It was all gone. His breath, his heartbeat, the pull of gravity, the ache in his bones. His life. Danny breathed out a breath he didn't have and let himself drift up a few inches into the air. At least he didn't hurt, for now. Returning to his body after this trip was going to be miserable. That was a later him problem. Right then, Danny just enjoyed being weightless. He breathed in and out, letting his body relax from the top of his head down to his toes and all the way out to the tips of his wings. Wait, is what now? Danny's feet hit the ground hard. He scrambled his way over to the long mirror tilted up against the wall by the door and froze. Wings. Those were wings. Massive black wings with spots of white on the inside and more white on the outside. There was an iridescent sheen to them as he twisted and turned to try and get a look of them. He had wings as Phantom now. Wings that were definitely like he had seen in the videos when he was that bird thing. Danny ran his fingers over his face, wincing as his fingertips caught a little. His taloned fingertips. That's great. He was turning into a bird. Cheap, motherfucker, Danny thought hysterically. He had been expecting a midlife crisis as he swiftly approached 40, but turning into a bird wasn't how he thought it would go. He had been expecting a midlife crisis as he swiftly approached 40, but turning into a bird wasn't how he thought it would go. He needed to get to the Far Frozen. He needed answers. He needed Frostbite to have answers. Focusing on the concept of the Far Frozen, Danny dragged a clawed finger through the air, tearing a hole in reality. The portal glowed a noxious green. Danny took a breath and flew through it. That was chapter 4. This is a little short, and since I was gone for a while, I'm going to go ahead and start reading chapter 5. "So, what's the verdict, Doc?" Danny asked. He was still trying really hard to keep his tone light and to not fidget, mostly because when he fidgeted, the wings moved. And then he remembered he had wings. He really wanted an answer to the wings thing. "Well, Phantom," Frostbite said as he continued to look at the data. "Well, Phantom," Frostbite said as he continued to look at the data. "Your status as a alpha continues to bring about most interesting developments at the most interesting pacing." Danny groaned. He didn't want to be interesting. There had been enough being interesting in his lifetime already. Couldn't he just have a calm rest of his life? Couldn't all of these interesting developments wait until he was properly dead? Danny took a deep breath so that he didn't end up snapping at Frostbite. Okay, right. What sort of developments are we talking about here? Because wings seem pretty unusual to me, even among ghosts. Oh, yes, certainly. Fundamentally, such a change, if one is to change, shouldn't come so early, and certainly not before other more common physical developments, Frostbite said, rubbing at his chin with his icy claws. At least not based on what we know of human ghosts. Danny scrubbed at his face. The wings shifted. Frostbite, I get this is all very interesting to you, but I need you to explain things, please. Frostbite gave a little huff of air. If you had attended the lectures as I recommended, I can do that when I'm dead. It was an old discussion between them at this point. Phantom, Frostbite said kindly, you are already dead. And I'm still alive, Danny snapped. His patience frayed. The wings flared out. The tips of the primary feathers brushed against the edges of the wall. I am still alive. I have eternity to learn about being dead, but I only have one life. I only have one life, Frostbite, and I am already spending half of it dead. Just let me try and live it as much as I can. Please? Of course, Phantom. I am sorry, friend. I forgot what it's like to have things be fleeting. I know, Frostbite, Danny said, deflating as his anger extinguished. The wings folded tight against his back, a heavy weight that pulled his shoulders down. I know. Just break it down for me, okay? I'll sit in on all the lectures you want when I'm fully dead, I promise. Just, for right now, explain to me what you can. I need to know why I have these things on my back. Frostbite gave a solemn nod and pulled up a stool to sit down on. Human ghosts are very mutatable. This is a little surprise, really, with how mutatable living humans are. Even though as dead, when we are largely stagnant, humans still often find their way to change. Personally, I suspect that even as a ghost, humans need the change to avoid fading. You've seen these features in many of your friends and rivals. Colored skin, fiery hair, exaggerate features. These are all things that you halfas seem to lack. My assumption has always been that it is your living half that keeps your features grounded, while, not in reality, in a more fixed visage. Plasmius's hair smolders some of these days, Danny pointed out. It does. The hair is often one of the first changes, and Plasmius is both an older ghost than you, but also a much older human. Frostbite paused before adding with a wry smile, he is also much more fiery in nature than you are. That made Danny give a soft snort of amusement. Okay, so changes are expected. Got it. I guess some go further, like Skulker? He is certainly an example of that. Spectra is another. By all reason, these changes can range from wish fulfillment to the effects of one's insecurities. The longer one has been dead, the larger part those feelings play in someone's making. The more likely drastic changes are, Frostbite explained. Though there has yet to be any clear rhyme or reason to much of it. Personally, I believe that the less fulfilled a ghost is, the more that they will change and attempt to bring that part of themselves peace. Skulker needing to kill big game to soothe over feeling little and insignificant made him actually tiny, and at the same time into a literal killing machine. Right, got it, Danny said. And I guess that's why Plasmius still looks like he's just brushing 40. He was always vain, but Frostbite, I don't want wings. No, but you've always been exceptional, Danny Fenton, Frostbite said somberly. Other ghosts master 1 or 2 skills. You master any you are exposed to. Other ghosts grow slowly. You grow by leaps and bounds. At first, I thought it might be part of being a Halfa, but we do not see the same growth in Plasmius and Danny. Plasmius is changing at a relatively normal rate, and Danny, while advanced at first due to the nature of her creation, has stagnated quickly. Danny kept his eyes on his hands. He felt like he was 14 again, scared and uncertain. Why am I different? I do not have the why, but I believe the because is that you are destined in time to become an ancient, or at least something akin to one. It was a good thing Danny didn't need to breathe right then. He was very sure he couldn't if he tried. An ancient? Frostbite nodded. Or something akin to one. Danny bowed over and buried his face in his hands. The wings responded and came up to curl around him as if trying to shield him from the world behind oil-slick feathers. It made Danny want to rip them off. If nothing else, ghosts are beholden to symbolism, Frostbite said, his words a grounding rumble. Ancients more than the rest. The wings mean something, Phantom, even if you are unsure what. Answers will come. I hate waiting, Danny said, mostly just to be pedantic. He was allowed. He'd grown new limbs, for fuck's sake. Frostbite rested a gentle hand on Danny's back, right between the wings. At first, Danny had thought that if he finished with Frostbite early, he would spend a few days in the zone to catch up with some other ghosts. He hadn't wanted to with the wings. It wasn't that Danny was ashamed of the wings, not from the fact of having different features, but Frostbite had seemed certain that Danny was a heavily mutatable state right then. The more people that knew Phantom with the wings, the more likely the wings were to stick, as they were cemented in consciousness and identity, or something like that. Danny had a whole stack of reading tucked away in his chest to go through later. Just wanting some time alone, Danny had given himself somewhere between an hour and a day, time was hard to tell in the zone, to sulk among the sparks and dust that were long dead stars before he forced himself to get a grip and go home. He was an adult for, well, him's sake, he guessed. He could deal with this. The reading was set on the left side of the coffee table with a fresh notebook next to it. It wouldn't do well to mix up his work with his actual work, so Danny was sure to pick out one with a green cover from the stash of his favorite dot pattern paper notebooks that he kept on hand. He'd draw a blob ghost or something on it later. A few colored pens and a highlighter joined the little pile, all set in a battered and chipped Amity Park tourist trap mug. Sam had gotten it for Danny as a present due to the "so hideous it was funny" caricature of Phantom on it. On the right side of the coffee table went a box of protein bars, a few electrolyte drinks, a pile of Suckum candies, and Danny's well-stocked pill container. He moved the coffee table a little closer to the couch, turned the TV on to a playlist of Mythbuster episodes, and made sure he had his favorite blanket in reach before he transformed back. And fuck, that hurt. Pain shot up Danny's back, radiating through his shoulders and shooting along his Lichtenberg scars so intensely that they burned. Danny collapsed inelegantly onto the couch with a defeated whimper. Maybe it was the wings? Did having a different set of limbs as a ghost cause transferred muscle aches to his human form? He didn't even have muscles as a ghost. Not really. But the mind was a very powerful thing, and not even Frostbite was entirely sure how exactly the two parts of a Halfa affected each other. After the worst of the pain had dulled slightly, Danny managed to toss back his medication, missing doses while Phantom never did him any good, and pulled the candies close enough that he could use them as a distraction for his senses. Slowly, the muscle relaxant worked its magic, and Danny became a boneless lump. The episodes of Mythbusters idly distracted him as he just let his thoughts drift over what Frostbite had said. Frostbite was sure that there had been a reason, or several, that Danny's form had been shifting into a bird, and after retained the wings. Frostbite felt the first step to all of this, if Danny was determined to either control or get an understanding of where this was going, was to understand the subconscious or symbolic particulars of the change. The why Frostbite felt was clear. Danny had been without a haunt for far too long. Yes, Frostbite accepted that the pollen may have certainly accelerated matters, hence the full bird that night and only the wings now, but Frostbite was adamant that the change wouldn't have been occurring at this stage if Phantom had still been the protector of Amity Park. In Amity Park, Phantom had a purpose. Phantom was a protector and guardian. That guardianship extended to a very limited range. Now that Amity Park was many, many years behind him, and Danny was living in a place already full of its own protectors, the Phantom part of Danny was left adrift, which allowed for this new stage of ghosthood. Why couldn't his ghost have just be happy with a nice long nap? "Fuck you, Phantom," Danny grumbled, as he watched a car be vaporized upon impact on the screen. Idly, Danny wondered if he could get an object up to that speed if he flew fast enough. Several hours and several protein bars later, Danny was managing to sit up enough to start going through some of the reading Frostbite had sent. He scribbled notes as he went. 2 more episodes, and delivered Indian food later, Danny scrawled on the top of the fresh the subconscious and symbolic particulars of wings. Why on earth and beyond did he have wings? Flying, Danny wrote first, followed by as many reasons as he could think of why he loved flying, from the freedom of it to space to the way it felt to move through a cloud. Freedom branched off into movement and escape, and getting to become his own person without the weight of Amity. Gravity and identity sprawled into transformation and his death, and the million of ways it had changed everything about his life. It was hard to think about. Danny turned the page. Wings. Wings and feathers, birds, pigeons and crows and ducks and robins. And robins. Biblically accurate angels who created the cosmos, hope, and always hope. Hope is the thing with feathers. Hope and robins and bats. And always hope. Was Gotham his haunt? Was he the thing with feathers? By Thursday, Danny was feeling much more human, or at least close to human as he ever felt. Had tonight been anything more active than sitting in a seat and watching a ballet, Danny would have had to beg off, but he figured this much he could manage. Besides, pushing a little so as to not disappoint Cass on her big night was worth it. She was a sweet girl, and Danny had the feeling that she could use more people celebrating her. Not that Danny expected to actually see Cass the night beyond her time on stage. Still, Danny figured he should at least look the part of a ballet patron, and dug the cobalt blue suit that he had gotten for Jazz's wedding out of its bag in the back of his closet. He'd at least be presentable, even if his hair never quite behaved. He kept it much shorter now, mostly that it was out of the way, and hoped that tonight a shower and some hair gel would be enough. At least the little star-shaped sapphire studs Tucker and Sam had gotten him for passing his dissertation looked good. Bless his piercings, never seeming to fully close up. A quick pat to his coat pockets to make sure he had everything, and Danny was off. Gotham was thankfully quiet that night, or as quiet as Gotham ever was, and Danny even managed to catch an earlier connecting train. It left him enough time for a leisurely walk to the opera house. The lobby of the grand building was buzzing with excited patrons, and Danny did his best to slip through. He really just wanted to find his seat, which was apparently upstairs and all the way down a hall that became narrower than he expected as he continued. There was another ticket check, which Danny thought as odd, until he realized he passed by an open curtain that these were theater box seats, which was odd. Danny glanced down at his phone. Was he in the wrong place? Ah, Danny, you found us all right. Apparently not, because that was definitely Bruce Wayne's voice. Yup, that was Bruce Wayne himself, looking far too handsome in a deep gray suit. Danny really hoped he wasn't blushing because, damn, did the man cut a dashing figure. A little part of Danny wanted to reach out and run his fingers across one of those impressively broad shoulders. I did, Danny said, head ducked down slightly as he rubbed at the back of his neck. Though, honestly, I didn't expect this to be what you meant when you offered to get the ticket for me. I didn't mean to intrude on your family time. Bruce chuckled, and Danny felt he might melt a little. Nonsense. It will be a relief to have another adult around. Hey, some of us are adults, someone from in the booth said. A moment later, Dick Grayson appeared with a large smile and wearing a suit that was the brightest magenta that Danny had ever seen. That remains to be seen, Bruce said dryly, though his mouth was quirked in a smile. His son ignored him. Hi, I'm Dick Grayson, Bruce's oldest and totally an adult, Dick said, offering his hand. Bruce was practically a teen dad when he adopted me. Please don't spread rumors like that, Bruce said with a long-suffering sigh of a tired father. Luckily, I think it's all pretty easy to fact-check, Danny said, before he thought better of it. He shook the offered hand. Nice to meet you, Dick. I'm Danny Fenton. It's good to meet you. I think Cass really liked meeting someone who can sign with her out in the wild. I just wish I wasn't so rusty, Danny said, feeling mildly embarrassed at the praise over his poor skills. I'll have to brush up on some things. I'm sure that would mean a lot to her, Bruce replied. The family knows how to sign, of course, but sadly she isn't so lucky most places. It's nice for her to have others to talk to on days where her voice isn't around. I can only imagine. I wish that it was taught in schools. You'd think with all the advancements in proof of concept with baby sign language, they would. He cut himself off with a flustered little laugh. Sorry, my sister is a behavioral psychologist with a 2-year-old daughter. I get to hear a lot about things like baby sign language and color perception and the stages of personality growth. Luckily, Bruce just laughed and motioned for Danny to enter the box. A stage I sadly missed with all of my children. So, your sister is another Dr. Fenton in the family? 4th, actually. Both of my parents are also Dr. Fenton. It's 5 if you count my sister-in-law, but she kept her last name for publication reasons. I guess you looked me up if you know about my PhD? Danny wasn't offended at that. If he had a daughter who befriended a random older man at work, he would sure as hell look them up too. Bruce, however, smiled apologetically. I asked Lucius about you. You've made quite an impression on him. He has promised to have my head on a platter if I or my horde of children do anything to drive you away. Danny laughed at that and gratefully sunk into the seat that Bruce indicated. He was starting to feel the walk here. Knowing Lucius, he'd get it too. I think he always gets his way eventually, at least if my improved work-life balance has anything to say about it. Not good at that? Dick asked. He sat down catty-cornered to Danny. Danny turned carefully to look at him, ignoring the twinge in his back as best he could. Danny would have shrugged if he thought he could have. Classic engineer with ADHD problems. I can lose track of time a little too easily. Danny glanced at Bruce with a wry little smile. Apparently, WE is big on us not spending all our time at work. Not really, Bruce said with a little quirked smile. You all work hard, but work shouldn't be everything. It's something that I had to learn myself. No kidding, Dick said. Bruce gave a little snort. As if you aren't as bad as I am. Dick just smiled serenely at his father before turning back to Danny. No one for you to go home to then? No partner or pets? Just too many plants, Danny admitted. One of my oldest friends is a botanist doing medical research, and every time I see her, I end up with another one. They've sort of taken over my apartment now that I've been in one for the past few years. Some of them are drama queens about getting watered, but I have a little system rigged up for the really thirsty ones. It helps if I need to be away for more than a day or two, and that is probably way more about my plants than you needed or wanted to know. Sorry. Bruce's low rumble of a chuckle felt like it settled warmly in Danny's chest. There was no way he wasn't blushing at least a little bit now. Why was Bruce affecting him so much? Yes, it had been a rather long time since Danny had been on a date, much less more. Yes, Bruce was Gotham's eternal most handsome bachelor, which... wow, does the city have that right? Yes, other than a handshake, Danny hadn't been touched by another human since waking up in the still so weird cuddle pile of superheroes. Yes to all of that, but really, Danny should not be blushing like he was still in his 20s at a chuckle. He wanted to sink right through his seat and disappear. It sounds to me like your friend picked the right person to give plants to. It's obvious you care for them, Bruce said with a soft smile that Danny tried not to look at. Danny glanced out over the edge of the balcony and down into the crowd and said, well, I try. They're living things, you know? They deserve the best chance I can reasonably give them. A very nice way to look at it. Shit, Dick said suddenly, softly and with conviction. Danny twisted around to look back at Dick, wincing as his back vehemently protested the motion. Sorry, Dick said quickly. It's just that it seems the elevator is down, so Babs won't be able to make it up here. It's down? Bruce asked with a confused frown. Apparently. I'm gonna go sit down on the ground floor with her, Dick said, as he tucked his phone into his coat as he stood. Sorry for bailing on you, Danny. It was nice to meet you. No, go. Spare yourself any more plant talk. Danny joked at his own expense. If any of the others aren't too settled, I'll send them up, Dick said to his father. But you know how they are. All too well, Bruce said dryly. Dick squeezed Bruce's shoulder and vanished back through the curtain. Dick. Operation 2 in the box is go. Jay. We need to stop letting you name ops. Dick. Nope, I'm the best. Several people are typing. Dick. Aww, Jenny Def thinks B is cute. Tim. Insert throwing up emoji here. Duke. Don't we want that? Dick. By the way, Danny is still hurt. Jay. Damn. Mood. Dick. What do you mean, mood? Jay? So that concludes both chapter 4 and 5 of A Thing with Wings by PaperPuffin. I absolutely love this fic so much, and these two chapters are just a good reminder of that. I really think it's interesting, first of all, how Danny does have chronic pain in this. I feel like it makes sense, like if we're talking about, I think I mentioned this in one of my other videos, but obviously rigor mortis sets in and all that stuff, so it makes sense. And I also think it's really cool. It's really good representation. I think I don't have chronic pain, so I wouldn't know, but representation is always a good thing in my opinion, so having that chronic pain is really cool. Well, not cool for Danny, but cool representation for those who do have it. And I also really like how Danny is so convinced that he's not dead. Like, he tries to ignore it so much, and it was discussed in a different chapter, but I really love it because it's so accurate. Like, if you died, you wouldn't want to, if you died not fully, you wouldn't want to acknowledge that. Like, that's such a huge thing, and I love the way that this is treated in the fic. But not to rant a little bit, but please do share your thoughts on this golden piece, and don't forget to reach out to the original author. I will have them again linked in the description to express your thanks. And of course, thank you for listening to this Dragon's Horde.